I'm Jez Benton, and this is Route to the Top. I'll be meeting with a whole range of leaders who'll climb a mountain together and do a video podcast from the summit. In this episode, I've traveled to Jackson Hole to interview Mike Novogratz, the founder and CEO of Galaxy. First thing is, this is by far the coldest route to the top. I think it was minus 17 when we came off the top of the tram.
It'll be exciting. It'll be a challenge between snowboard boots versus ski boots. Whose feet get colder?
Yeah, the length of this podcast depends definitely on us getting hypothermia. So I got my first question for you. I met you won't remember this, I met you 3 years ago at the Galaxy office. I was sat in the lobby waiting to meet somebody else, not you. You walk through. I walk up to you to introduce myself, and you're like, Jez, this is why we need you around here. I was like, what do you mean? He said, and you said, let me describe it to you like this. He said, when I was at Fortress, a bad day from a volatility standpoint was about 15%. He said, here in the crypto business, it's 100%. He said, so if you're wondering why people are wandering around this building going a little crazy, it's because this work is that volatile that people get a little bit crazy. So you told me that story, I've retold it a few times, but here's the question that I never got to ask you when you told me, because you told me and I was thinking about it. My question is how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that volatility, that constant kind of change?
Well, I used to drink too much, and then I ended up at rehab, and that was not good. To some degree, you get used to living with volatility, and you can gauge volatility. You can limit your volatility. Just because an asset is volatile doesn't mean you need to bet a ton. And so, if you're betting on an asset like a stock that has a 10% volatility, you might bet $10. To bet on Bitcoin, which used to have 100% volatility, to have the same bet, you should bet $1. But because so many people in crypto were so young, and this was their chance to make a fortune, people were betting way more than they should. And so you were making a fortune and losing a fortune. It made managing hard because you had young knuckleheads that thought they were geniuses because they bought something that went up 15 times, and they were like, oh, I'm so smart. And I was like, well, we'll see. It made managing investors' perception of your business difficult. And so it's just a harder business to run when you have that kind of chaos. Over time, all asset classes, as they mature, get more institutional money in, they get more stability, and volatility comes down. And crypto is about a third of the way through that journey.
Right. So how do you, because you got a lot of young guns, you got a great team at Galaxy, how do you teach them that? How do they learn, okay, this is sort of part of the journey, and how do they kind of handle it?
Well, so there's two different sets of employees in some ways. For the traders who are in it every single day, you literally teach them the math. You're like, guys, don't be a knucklehead. Just because the thing's 50 vol doesn't mean you got to bet, all your money on it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's 50 vol, bet less money. And so there's some just math. For the rest of the employees who you're trying to focus them on a 3-year, 5-year vision, you just got to keep hearing what that vision is. And, to some degree, you've got to be honest with people and say, hey, the path you're taking is going to be more volatile. If it's not for you, take a different path. Like, if you want to have more stability, don't work in a crypto business. We are this weird mix because we're institutional. So we had a lot of guys come in that wanted all the security of a traditional finance company, but the upside of a crypto company.
Right.
And at one point, you try your best you can, but at one point you're like, guys, it's just not the way it's going to work. But it's hard with things like lawyers and accountants. They don't have the risk tolerance that traders do often, or venture capitalists do. And so there's this, weird balance you try to get, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to the risk tolerance in a second, because I think one of the impressive things about Galaxy is how you have led over the last year and a half, 2 years to be in a position you're at. We've seen a lot of firms going under, a lot of distressed assets, to be acquired. Galaxy seems to have fared really well, and just manage the risk more appropriately, I guess, than others.
I used to joke that we were the tallest midget because we had so many bad competitors who were either unethical or unknowledgeable, or were ethical and then as times got tough made really bad and unethical decisions. And so just being kind of good stewards of capital and honest put us in the top 10%, which is a bit embarrassing for the industry, though I think it's changing pretty quick. We benefited from the fact that I spent my life running macro risk.
Yeah, I wondered how much of that from sort of the Fortress days.
It was Goldman and Fortress. Yeah. If there was a genius between 2017 and 22, it wasn't what we bought, it was what we sold. A lot of crypto people just refused to sell. And I took a very different viewpoint. When things got crazy, we took a lot of chips off the table, both in our liquid portfolio, but also in our venture portfolio. And I hear it over and over from venture capitalists, this could be the next Google. I'm like, guys, there's one Google, one Microsoft. By the way, they have monopolies. Like, you can't argue to me that any of these crypto companies have a monopoly 3 years into their life cycle. And so we've been much more willing to part with positions and then wait to look for the new opportunity than a lot of our competitors. We haven't been the best at it. There's some quiet Chinese whales that seem to frickin' have crystal balls. Maybe they do have crystal balls, I don't know. But we've done very well at it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been great to see because, again, when I joined you guys, which was 3 years ago, it was definitely on the upswing, and then the big dip. So it's been great to see you fare through that.
Wes Edens was my partner at Fortress, and in the middle of the financial crisis, I remember him saying, "Guys, we just fell into the freezing cold ocean, and there's a lifeboat right there. We need to pick the right angle to swim. If we pick the right angle and we get on the boat, we're going to live. If we pick the wrong angle, we're going to die. So let's be really deliberate in our decisions right now."
Yeah.
And luckily at Fortress, we picked the right angle and we survived, and all the partners have done well, and they sold the company, and it's a good story. It could have been a horrible story. And it was a little bit the same for crypto in 2022, 23. You had to do the right things. You had to not flinch at the wrong time. You had to make sure you were buttoned up and regulatory. You dealt with all the inquiries you got.
So that sort of brings me on to one of my questions I had about, you talked about Wes and Fortress and sort of right people in the room making the right decisions. At Galaxy, I've met the whole senior team. I know them pretty well. How often are you in the room with those guys figuring stuff out for the first time? Yeah. Because that's the fascinating thing about crypto is there's not a roadmap to this. Yeah. So how does that work?
I'm a 5-day a week in the office. Sometimes I used to be the first guy in the office every day. I'm now like top 5. It's because I'm trying to work out in the morning, and it screws my whole. You don't get in at 6:30 when you're working out at 6:30. But I'm on with my top guy daily, 2-3 times a day, with my top 10 guys at least twice a week, where we're all together, our top 6 to 10, depending on what group you want.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty hands-on in terms of giving ideas. I'm a little more hands-off in terms of letting people execute and do their business. And so it's a balance there. But there's a core team that is trying to make sure we don't run into an iceberg on a regular basis. Running crypto is just so much more challenging. The banks don't treat you like great clients. And so when you're going to trade equities at one place, you've got to put up tons of margin and tons of collateral, and they don't give you any credit for the crypto you own. And so managing your cash, it's moving around. It's like a shell game, trying to make sure you can't get stopped out on a crypto exchange, and you've got enough margin on the TradeFi exchanges. And so there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to allow you to service your clients, to make your bets. It's so much more complicated than it was at Fortress. Partly that's because of the regulatory regime that's at stake, partly because it's new plumbing, right? And people aren't comfortable with new plumbing.
So why do you do what you do?
I was with one of my good friends who's 40, and he said, when I talk to my friends, they think you're crazy for having started a third company. Like you were wealthy, you had a nice family office. Like, why do you do it?
I was thinking the same thing.
Maybe I am crazy. Listen, I said I'm not going to do something big unless it hits three things. I want to work with young people because I think the world is young people. It's fun, it's energetic. You know, ski with young people, you just ski better.
Yeah.
Ski with a bunch of 70-year-olds and you're going to ski like a 70-year-old. Slow, boring. Ski with my, soon-to-be son-in-law and his friends, and you're like, oh shit. You're huffing, you're puffing, you're trying to, you keep up. It's the same thing in business, and so you learn from young people. The crypto revolution is a young person's revolution. Knowing what dog with hat is. Like I tell you, 90% of 59-year-olds don't know dog with hat. Dog with hat's an awesome meme coin. And so it was work with young people. It was learn something new. I had never really been a venture investor. I'd been a macro investor. Macro and venture have a lot in common, but a lot of differences. And so, now I've made 250 venture investments, and some great ones, both crypto and non-crypto. And that same intuition that makes you good at macro, I think makes you good at venture. And so I became a venture investor. And the third, and maybe most important, is I want to do something where I'm contributing. And there was a role in crypto for, I wish I could say a gray-haired old man, but I'll say a bald man with a cool blue cap, that I could contribute, that I could help mentor young people, that I could explain this new industry to people that were my age in my old industry and do it with some credibility, both from Fortress and Goldman Sachs before that. And so I thought I had a role to play.
Yeah.
We'll see how long that role is. I do constantly say, I spent more time on TV in crypto than everyone else combined, which was a stat we found out, which is kind of crazy. I'm ready for the new, the new young spokespeople to show up, and in some ways, I think I've served my purpose in that piece of it.
But there's some trust in that. I think.
Yeah.
I think people, you've got some experience. Your journey has been a hell of an adventure. You're obviously very successful. You know what you're doing. So I think there's a lot of trust in the crypto community in Mike.
But that was why I started.
Yeah.
If I had known how hard it was to build a great business, maybe I would have done a big hedge fund. Building a business is so much harder than, for me, running a hedge fund. It's a longer term focus. You're not to invest in the short run for a long run win, and you're not certain exactly where the long run's going to be. It's very technical in terms of you're building plumbing, both regulatory plumbing and financial market plumbing, and that's not something that came natural to me. And so it's hiring the right people, it's making the big calls. And so, listen, I think we've done an okay job at it. We're getting much better. We've done a spectacular job at managing our book, our investing team. Chris Ferrara, our venture team, the trading team that I work with, has done an A+ job.
Yeah.
And building the business, we're getting there, but it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like you said, it's not your favorite thing to do on the building the business side, but I can see, you're still smiling, you're still enjoying it, you still have optimism about the whole
I like going
thing.
to work, and this ETF that just happened was so important. We're going to get more regulatory clarity next year and more the year after. And so if you can look with a 2 to 3 year, 4 year horizon, we're just at the beginning. This is not the end. It's not the beginning of the end. This is the start.
Yeah, interesting. So let's go back to the start. This podcast is called Route to the Top, and how I normally start this podcast is to wind you back to the early days and say, what are the key moments throughout your life that's kind of got you to here? So let's do a bit of a rewind and talk about that. So Army, helicopter pilot, wrestler, is that right?
I think
Princeton wrestler.
Wrestling is probably the most important thing I did in my life.
Okay.
Because it's a brutally tough sport. And it's an ascetic sport. It's a stoic sport. It teaches you toughness. You're out of shape. The guy says, I want you to climb a hill, and you're still going to climb the hill even though you're out of shape because you're just too embarrassed not to.
Right.
There's a toughness about being a wrestler. You get knocked down, you get back up again. And you get knocked down again. You get punched in the face. It hurts. You're like, ooh, that hurt. And you get back up again. And so that toughness that you learn from a 10, 15-year journey through wrestling just comes with you in everything else you do. And so if there's one thing I credit for my resilience in life, it's wrestling. the Army I loved, and I loved it because it gives you a shot of America that most Northeasterners don't get, that most kids that went to Princeton don't get. Listen, my dad was in the Army, so I already kind of knew the Army, but going yourself to boot camp and officer training camp and hit kids from all over the country, and they shave your head, they, put you in some shitty fucking gym shorts and t-shirt, and they wake you up at 5:30 in the morning, and it sucks. But you're doing it together, and you bond really quick, and you realize you're no different than the guy from Alabama. You're born in a different zip code. And it did more for race relations in our country. I kind of wish we still had everyone do 2 years. Not because I think we should have such a giant military, because I think that mixing of people in a common pursuit, that sucks.
Yeah, it's a level playing field.
And it's the part that sucks that's important.
Yeah.
People bond. You climbed Everest. I'm sure that team is like, climbing Everest looks great. It probably sucks.
Yeah, for a lot of the time.
And so it's suffering together which bonds you, I think. And so I think the Army gives you a lot of that.
Yeah, it's funny. Everest, before I went, I remember talking to the expedition leader. He was based out of Chamonix at the time. And I was in his office. We were laughing away. And I said, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm excited about it. And he looks at me dead in the eye, goes, Jez, nobody enjoys Everest until they get home. And I was like, seriously? I'm going to spend 2 months on this mountain not having fun, not enjoying myself? He's like, yeah, pretty much. Until you get back home. And it was tough, but I definitely, that moment, and that story stuck with me because I'm like, no, I'm going to make damn sure when I'm there, and I want to enjoy the ride. I can't be 2 months of suffering and not try and enjoy the ride as hard as it is. Yeah. And I get that sense about you, that sort of resilience and mental toughness actually allows you to enjoy the difficulties.
Gallows humor is such an important part of life. It's an important part of being a trader. There's a famous song, Blood on the Saddle. We sing it every time the markets just eviscerate you. A few old traders call each other up, and it's probably not politically correct anymore, but it's, you have to have some gallows humor. You have to be able to laugh at your misery or at your pain along the way. And I think, listen, there is joy in the adrenaline of winning. There's joy in hiring a young person and seeing them thrive. There's joy in so much of running a business, otherwise you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so even, I was talking to my kids about like the responsibility of money. I said, well, money is just energy, right? Like we built this hotel here with me and 3 of my partners, and it brings good energy to the people that stay there, the people that are members. And it's been an okay investment. We've probably lost, we've never broken even yet. We're hoping to 1 year, but everything is not just for money. It's can you convert stinky pieces of paper into good energy?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you kind of try to do in starting a business, in your philanthropy, in your investments. So if you think of money as energy, it makes it easier.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to young people real quick. I've got 2 things I want to go back to. I'm going to go back to young people. In my business, certainly in the leadership development side, I work with a lot of leaders who are like, I don't get this generation. I don't know how to handle them. They want more than they deserve. They haven't earned the right. You're the opposite of that. You are bring them in, fire them up, let them learn, leverage their energy. Yeah. So you're a very untraditional thinker when it comes to being a leader.
I think people get too conservative too quick, and it's, if it was not my way, it wasn't the right way. And I'm like, dude, go hang out with my son Nacho and his Gen Z friends. They're ballers. They are smart. They are kind. They have a different value set than we did, partly because they grew up in a different world.
They don't. People have limited memory. If I wind back to when I was 24,
you were a knucklehead.
Yeah. Well, I moved to the US when I was 27. Moved to New York. I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah. I was making up as I went along, and end up building the business, and still here 23 years later. But I was figuring it out as I went. So.
Yeah, I've got a lot of faith in. I actually have more faith in the new generation than the baby boomers need to get off the stage. We need new energy in politics. And we need people that are 50 to 60. 50 to 60 is your leadership decade. 50 to 65, that's when you should run companies, you should run the country.
Yeah, you've got enough experience, but you're not too distant from everything. Your mind is still strong.
You still have energy, you're strong.
Yeah.
Once you can't ski down Le Cirque, you should get off the corporate board.
Which is what we're going to ski down in a few minutes. So one of the other ones I want to go back to, toughness and resilience. You sent me a horrible text message a year ago with one of those pictures where you look at it and you feel like you're going to be sick. And less than a year later, here we stand. So that mental toughness and resilience, also physical toughness and resilience, going back to the whole wrestling thing. You took a physical pounding.
Well, and a lot of luck. So like I crashed skiing and my ski cut my leg right to the bone and I got 400 stitches, which sounds worse than it was. But for a few seconds,
it doesn't look worse than it was.
It felt really shitty. Thank God we were in bounds, not out of bounds. Thank God I was at Jackson Hole where they have an amazing ski patrol, and they have an amazing, facility right on the mountain. And in town, there was one of the best trauma surgeons around.
Yeah.
And so there was a series of people, probably 60, that aided me in that 5 hours from, oh shit. Because I remember I looked down and blood's gushing out, and my first thought was, oh, this isn't even Corbett's. I do not want to die an ignominious death, dying on the circ.
Don't want to be on a blue run.
And I'm thinking to myself, shit, did I hit an artery? Blood's gushing out. It was, I guess, from the muscle. Then I realized, your femoral artery's on the inside of your leg, not the outside. So I calmed down a little bit. But you don't know if blood's gushing out. And I'm doing the math. I'm like, you got 8 pints of blood. I know you give a pint when you give blood. You probably could give 2. So I think I'm 2 pints before I pass out. And how much blood? I'm trying to think what's a pint and screaming for help. And but without literally probably 50 people, you're screwed. And so props to the Jackson Hole team. But there's a lot of luck involved in that. Recovering was less difficult than I thought. Psychologically, I was kind of like, I wanted to get back up. And even skiing, a lot of people say, you can't go skiing. What are you talking about? Skiing really fast behind good skiers just makes you feel young. It makes you feel alive. It makes you feel vital. And so I think too many people in our country give up athleticism when they're 45 or 35 sometimes, 55, 65. You can stay athletic until you die. Maybe you're not jumping off Corbett's at 80.
Maybe not.
You might.
No.
But,
no time soon.
And so, I love coming out here. I love being outside. Even being in the cold makes you feel alive.
Yeah. It's a stunning spot. Best piece of advice you ever got? Best piece of advice you ever give?
I think the best piece of advice I ever got was from my friend Paul Jones, who said, Novogratz, focus on people who are kind. I've got a son-in-law, and pretty close to, I think I'll have a second son-in-law, to be. And my only judge on who's good enough for my daughters is, are they kind? Kindness is in abundance in the world, and it's in scarcity in the world. Yeah. Find the abundance of kindness. And so that's my advice. The best advice I ever gave was interesting. I got a letter from a young kid who I gave a tour of a park I'm building, and he had dyslexia. And I told him a story of my daughter who had dyslexia. And when I first found out she had dyslexia, John Irving, the great writer, who fancied himself a wrestler before a writer. And he wasn't even that good.
It all goes back to wrestling.
He wasn't even that good at wrestling, but he loves the sport. Loved it. And he said, let me tell you about dyslexia. You just got to outwork everybody. He said, I'm not a better writer. I just outright people. He said, give me the phone. Don't talk to your daughter. And so, my daughter's like 8 at the time. She doesn't know who John Irving is. And he said, Anna, listen, it's going to take you twice as long to read a book as the next person. Who cares? Outwork everyone. And I do think that spirit of, guys, there's no limitations if you're willing to work hard.
Yep.
My college essay was from George Blanda, Hard Work Equals Success. It was an autograph he gave me. George Blanda was, for the young people, a Oakland Raiders legend. And I used to collect autographs. Hard work equals success. And I think that message of outworking people, and you got to love what you do, I think you're going to work hard. But nobody wins big in life. If it's Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods as 2 of the best athletes of all time, they shot more hoops. They swung more golf clubs. You just have to outwork people if you want to really win. And that's a hard message for people because a lot of people want to win without working, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. They want to make the quick buck and be done.
Yeah.
So let's close this out around leadership. So I've picked up a bunch of stuff from you. So curiosity, be nice, about relationships, resilience, physical, mental toughness. What else would you add to the list of key kind of leadership traits?
I think it's try to help people untap their potential. People don't reach their potential because of fear. There's one reason people don't. Even on the ski mountain, this guy we were skiing with, this D1 athlete, he was skiing in fight or flight the whole time.
Right.
And I was like, go to an easier run and ski with joy. Goof around up there until you feel comfortable and then move yourself up. But how do you get out of fear and into joy? How do you get out of scarcity and into abundance? And that's through a lot of work people have to do on themselves. So one of my leadership things is, dude, get a shrink, go on an ayahuasca mission, do something, do meditation, something that you can learn about yourself to get yourself out of fear. Because it's fear that stops people from succeeding. And physical, it's the fight or flight. But in trading, it's fight or flight. You start losing money, your mind starts going, oh my God, I could lose everything and I'll be broke and my kids won't go to school. And that's just a bad narrative.
Yeah, it's funny. This is not a question that I had for you, but you said it there. And when you were talking about your accident, you were like, most people would be lying there going, oh my God, get me help, losing their mind and all the rest of it. You were like doing the math. You're like, okay, I got 8 pints of blood. I know I can donate 2. So I got how much is coming out of me? How long do I have? Like you're.
I think I have a very strange brain that in periods of real stress, the stress goes in my body, but my mind stays in my brain.
Yeah.
I kind of try to figure things out. Listen, when they came to me, I was a Borscht Belt comedian. I was making jokes the whole time, trying to keep people comfortable and laughing. And once I realized I wasn't dying, then I was kind of funny about the whole thing. I didn't want to lose my freaking leg. When they put a tourniquet on, they write the time on your hand. And I was like, what's the time for? They're like, oh, no big deal. And you got
20 minutes?
20 minutes or 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, speed it up, people.
Yeah.
And so it's always been a thing. When the markets are falling apart, I keep my cool, but it shows up. When I get a massage, the masseuse is like, are you okay?
Oh, because you hold the tension?
In my neck, in my back, I think there's a disconnect. And I think if I was did more meditation, maybe that would connect and maybe I wouldn't trade as well. I don't know.
Right.
But I do think it's how do you figure out a way around fear? And drinking is not the right way. Drugs are not the right way. The right way is to realize it's just a narrative.
Yeah.
You're going to be fine.
Yeah, lean into it. What's the worst that can happen? I see a lot of people suffer with anxiety. They kind of gets hooked and they can't get past it. And it was about 2 years ago that I, for the very first time in my life, experienced real anxiety, and it has a physical and mental effect on you. I couldn't believe it. I was pretty resilient for most of my life, and I'm like, wow, this one situation has kind of blown it for me. And you're right. Who do you speak to? How do you reach out? How do you bring joy back into your life? How do you get through that so you don't become a victim?
This doesn't sound completely counterintuitive, but one of the great gifts in life is suffering your own mental health crises. I mean, you shouldn't wish it on anybody, but when you go through a mental health crisis, and most of the world goes through a mental health crisis, if it's a 3-day, a 3-week, a 3-month, or a year, you realize, oh, that's what those other people
are.
So you develop such a different empathy for the world.
Yeah.
You're like, oh. Like I did go to rehab when I was 34 years old. And, you can always say, I didn't need the guy. It's an amazing experience because you do 5 years of therapy in 28 days. And the most interesting thing I took away was these people that if I had read their story, I would have thought, oh my God, they're horrible people, were actually awesome, and they had been traumatized at one point in life. They were stuck on something or addicted to something, and so that empathetic jump from seeing someone who I remember the first mental health crisis. I saw one of my buddies' girlfriend dumped him, and he just went into a terrible spiral. And I was like, dude, what the fuck's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I wanted to kick him in the It made no sense to me until something happened to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And
the true sense of empathy. I had it the same with my brother. He had it for years. He actually had to retire young. He was in stock lending at Aviva in the UK, big insurer. And yeah, he had to give up the whole thing and just stop working. I was like, what's wrong with you? You know, and he's like, well, if I don't swim every morning for an hour and if I don't do this, I can't function. I was like, nah, get over it. You know, I had zero empathy for my brother for a good 5 or 6 years. I just couldn't work it. And now I'm just like seeing a completely different light and how difficult and hard that must have been.
And we are going through this era where advancements in how we deal and treat mental health are breathtaking, both in the pharmaceutical space and in the psychedelic space, the plant-based medicine space. You're going to see psilocybin, MDMA, all get approved for medical use within the next few years. You're going to see either more radical treatments, ibogaine and ayahuasca. Maybe not in the traditional medical sense, but derivatives of that.
Right.
And I think as we destigmatize mental health, I gave my only graduation speech was to the University of Iowa, and part of it was, you're the generation that needs to destigmatize mental health, to realize that we're all mental health patients. I also talked about ayahuasca and psilocybin. The dean looked over at me.
I was going to say,
are you sure? And maybe Iowa wasn't the right place for that speech. Might have been better at Brown, but I felt like I wanted to talk about it because I do think it's so important. I think, like we look at this country and it's between obesity and depression and bipolar, and there's so much mental health, so much trauma in neighborhoods, trauma in race, that we need a whole new outlook on how to heal and how to get healthy.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about you is going back to the speeches. You don't hold back. You say what you mean, but people know where you stand. That's from the very first time I met you. I was like, I like Mike because I know what he's thinking and I know where he stands. And if you like something, you say it. And if you don't like something, then you equally say it. And I think for people who are working for you, that actually helps. It's like there's no surprise here. We're hearing Mike say what he's thinking, and that helps us too. So that level of transparency from you, I think, is fantastic.
Thank you.
Even if it might get you into trouble every now and again.
That's a lot of trouble.
All right. I'm shivering. I don't know about you.
Well done.
Thanks, man. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Good work.